So a very warm welcome to Gemma Miles. We met because we both teach hypopressives and are very interested in women's health. So I wanted to talk to her particularly about diastasis recti, which I see a lot in my postnatal classes. We'll get into what exactly it is and how it occurs and all, how you check things like that later. But I just wanted to start with asking Gemma to introduce herself and maybe, why did you get interested in this particular area?
Hi, Tessa. So thank you for inviting me for a chat. I am a soft tissue therapist. So I do manual therapy on bodies, generally working with people in pain or injury, that sort of thing. And I'm also a Pilates teacher. And then 4.5 years ago, I had my first child. I had my little son, Oscar, who obviously being pregnant had a big impact on my body. And that's when I learned hypopressives and found how much that helped me in my pelvic floor recovery, as well as my own diastasis healing. And that was really helpful. And obviously being working in healthcare, I was so interested in the hypopressives that I actually trained then to be an instructor myself. So and that's my hypopressives background. But since then, I've and becoming a mum and having all of these different issues it happened to my body. I had a mild prolapse with Oscar as well, and then recently had my second baby this time last year. Rose will be 1 on New Year's Eve. So again, I've been working through a process of healing my own body postnatally through that. So all of this has given me a great interest in women's health and helping mums recover their own bodies. And it's so often overlooked because we prioritize the baby, and there's so much that we can do to help new mums in their healing. So
I was going to say at the beginning, I mean, sometimes it's just survival, isn't it? From day to day, you're surviving with the newborn and just keeping them alive, and there's not much time left over to think about your recovery, or you might not think about it in terms of recovery, but just getting back to feeling strong again. And that's why I trained in the hypopressives, because I was seeing in the mum and baby yoga that some mums would just not sort of feel themselves. They're like there was a sort of a weakness now around their core, and then that starts to affect how you're lifting the child, and it has a knock-on effect. So for that reason, for my postnatal clients, but also for the women that I saw coming to my women's circle who were later on in life, so coming towards the menopause, and that the hormones are shifting then as well, and then perhaps never had a problem with their pelvic floor, but at that point maybe having a prolapse or some issues starting. And I think these things are common. They're not normal. You shouldn't have to put up with leaking or sort of weakness and things, but they are common, and it seems to often to be pushed back out of people's priorities, or you sort of feel like a bit of a nuisance sometimes if you're trying to get help for it and feeling like you're not really getting somewhere.
Yeah, I think because it's quite often something you can put up with, or sort of just muddle on with. We do just put it to one side because there's so many other things coming in, I need this for school, or I need that, or there's so much else in life that we put it to the bottom of the list.
So I'm thinking if somebody's watching this, it's probably because they're interested, because they might have a tummy gap or abdominal separation or diastasis recti, the different kind of names for it, but somebody might not know exactly. So can you describe, what is it?
Yeah, it's got a very fancy sounding name, hasn't it? And it's you might have been told, you might have had a check, you might not have. Postnatally, it's really common just not to even have your GP check you. It's very simple. It's a separation of your abdominal muscles. So when we're pregnant, the baby grows, and obviously our tummy has to accommodate a growing baby. So the abdominal muscles, if I just stand up for a second so I can put my hands on my tummy, we've got different layers of tummy muscles. Actually, we've got 3 layers, but down the middle there's connective tissue, there's strong connective tissue there that holds the 2 sides together. So as your baby grows, those 2 sides of the muscles separate, and this connective tissue in the middle is stretched and thinned and let's say weakened. It's not that there's an actual gap there, so you haven't got a hole, but it's weaker than normal, and the tummy muscles are further apart. So that happens to everyone pretty much when they're pregnant, and usually that will come back together and heal fine post-birth. But for some women it takes longer, and for some women they need a little bit of help just to strengthen it back up. It's fair to say that most people won't go exactly back to the way that they were before, and it would be crazy really to put that pressure on ourselves, trying to get, there's so many reasons, people are worried about getting their bodies back, but we grew a baby, things have changed, but we do want our bodies to be strong and whole again, and there's lots that we can do to make sure that that's the case, rather than feeling, you used some words earlier like disconnection and weakness and things, and I think it's really common for women not to really understand what it is that's different, just feels a bit wrong. They don't feel connected up, not really be able to put a finger on what it is. And quite often it is just that connecting back the core, and getting it working again with the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, because it all needs to work as a whole.
I know when I first started looking into it all, I read some research that said you could aim to get back to a 1 finger gap, and then some more recent sort of research I read was talking more like a 1 to 2 finger gap being perfectly normal after a baby. Now I think it depends on so many factors, and maybe we can go into that a bit more later, but you can also strengthen the musculature around, and but I think that's a really important message that you said, that our bodies have changed, and actually I like to share that I'm much more confident in my body post babies, because I was just awed at what my body did, and it kind of took my respect for my body to a whole new level. So yeah, it doesn't look exactly the same. I definitely don't have a 20-year-old's body, but I feel more connected to my body than ever before. And I think part of that is learning more about how does it function, how does it work? And hopefully after sort of watching this today, people will understand a little bit more about how it's all connected inside. It's not like we learn in biology where we have the lungs and we have this organ over here and that organ, and it all seems like it's separate, discrete things. It's all connected. Yeah. And in recent years, there's been a lot more work done about fascia and how that sort of envelops organs and connects all the different parts of the body. I just find it fascinating.
It really is. It really is. I should have brought my daughter's little toy. Actually, she's got, I don't know whether you know the kind of toy I'm talking about, with the little it's like a ball that you can squish together and then it springs apart. Lots of wooden beads and then rods connecting it, and you can squish it and it comes back together. It's a perfect model for talking about fascia. We've got our skeleton, which are the rods in a toy like that. And then we've got our muscles and skin and all of these ligaments, tendons. It's all connecting together. And if you stretch one bit, then somewhere else will get a little bit cramped up. And then, if you have a scar of some kind over here, it's pulling slightly. So, our bodies are all connected in that way. And so going through something like pregnancy with those dramatic changes, it goes without saying that things will be slightly different afterwards. And I think it's most helpful to think about getting back to a position of strength and confidence rather than worrying about 1 finger or 2 finger gaps and things like that. When we measure a diastasis, we usually talk about it because it's easy to sort of feel with your hands. You could talk about it in terms of width of fingers, but everybody's diastasis is their own and everybody's is different. Mine has settled at about a 2-finger gap. Okay, so by the definition of what you just talked about, it's a bit wide, but I feel stronger than ever. I feel stronger than before my first pregnancy now, and so I'm not going to let that bother me at all. You know, everybody's different, and it's much more about getting your functionality back and your strength.
I think it's also important to say that diastasis recti doesn't just affect people who've been pregnant, so men can have that as well, and it's often to do with posture and that affecting the forces kind of down through the body. So this is not just for pregnant women, but we particularly see a lot of these clients postnatally. Do you want to explain about the checking?
Yes,
because
sure.
I think you're right. A lot of people, when they go to their 6 to 8 week check, will not be checked for that gap.
Yeah, it's quite variable from what anecdotally I've heard from the people that I've seen in clinic. So you might, there are a number of people that probably train to do it. You can also probably ask your postnatal exercise or yoga teacher or anyone like that. A PT might be trained to do it if they're specialised in postnatal fitness. So there's a few people that you can ask, but you can also check yourself. So that's what I'm going to hop onto my little couch here and show you. So you lie your back and you've got your knees up so your feet are flat, so everything's nicely, you're nice and comfortable. And what you want to do is you're feeling the midline of your body above and below your belly button. So I would start at the top. And what you want to do is just a little sit up. So you're just raising your head slightly, which creates tension across the tummy here. And you can feel with your fingers the separation. Now mine is all above the belly button. I can feel that. It feels like a little belly. It feels quite rigid where the tummy muscles are. And then in the middle of that, there's a little dip. And you just feel sort of above, just waggle a little bit so you feel that separation. Now, the important thing really, as well as feeling the width of it, is to understand how much tension there is in that dip. If it's very soft, then that's something that we want to work on and do something about, because it can cause tension through into your back pain, some pelvic floor issues, things like that. I mean, you might be absolutely fine, have no symptoms, but if you are struggling with things not feeling quite right for whatever reason, then healing that diastasis and strengthening it back up is something that will really help you with your fitness and any pain or that you're going through.
Yeah, I think that's a really neat little check that somebody can do to have a sense of what might be happening. I think the good thing about seeing somebody who sees a lot of the diastasis recti is that they can have a sense of that diversity, because over the years of checking people, it's really different. Like you say, everybody is so different, and so there's been some that I felt that are very long and thin, so they extend below the navel and above the navel. I've also had some that are actually lengthways, they're quite short, but widthways just around the navel itself are very wide. And in terms of the depth as well, that's the bit that can feel really funny, I think, for people. If you feel in and you're feeling for that tension on either side, but sometimes there really is very little at all. And so once I remember doing it, and my fingers sort of disappeared inside. There was no resistance whatsoever, and there was sort of room to move my hand left and right. So it can really vary. So if you're at all not sure, I would say maybe have a referral to a women's health physio if your GP doesn't seem to be experienced in doing them. Or somebody who teaches hypopressives, or there are different, like you say, different people, aren't there? So what would be the next step if somebody comes, if they say, Gemma, I think I've got this, what can you then help them with? How would it work?
So for me, I like to have I've got a few different tools at my disposal, so I kind of like to mix it up a bit. The great thing about diastasis recti rehab is that there are some things that we can do and achieve results quite quickly. There are other things that we really need to manage our own expectations of our own bodies and our own healing about. So if I just talk about the muscles and the fascia and the changes that are involved in pregnancy, usually postnatally, we actually have quite a lot of tightness down the sides here of our abdominal muscles because we've been supporting a growing baby. So although we feel like we've got weak abdominals and we can't do a sit-up and we can't do X, Y, and Z, actually there's probably a lot of tightness there. So one of the really quick things to make a difference is to release all of that tension through the abdominal muscles, and that in itself can release some of the tension separating those two halves and letting them come back together. If you add on things like whether you had a C-section and you have scar tissue down here or any other abdominal surgery, even if it was pre having your babies, that's all scar tissue, that's things not moving and creating tension away from the midline of the body. So I really like to make sure that as a whole, your body is functioning as happily as it can be without these kind of tensions and pulls. So it could be, you know, even a shoulder or a hip issue, something like that. So first thing that I do is look at all of that, try and release off anything that might be creating tension through the body. Then I look at breathing, because the breath and the pelvic floor are all massively connected with our core. They have to all work in synchronization, and you know this, being a hypopressives teacher, that they automatically fire together. So we need to get that happening properly again if it isn't. And quite often, if you've had a baby, especially a high sitting baby, lungs are all cramped, your diaphragm's all squashed, ladies quite often start to breathe up here and not with their diaphragm anymore. So helping release the diaphragm, get the breath happening into the bottom of the rib cage again is really key.
I was going to talk a bit more. I was going to say about the kind of the mechanisms in a moment, but I just wanted to pick up on how you said you use the soft tissue work, because I think that's so important. Because what I see, you know, teach Pilates, I teach yoga, and that can be so helpful if there is a postural thing going on. Like you said, you know, if you started, the baby's grown and the breath has come up here. And what I see sometimes, it can be according to height. So if you have a smaller person where the baby's really all out front, and so they've lifted the rib cage up subconsciously to make space, and there's that rib thrusting happening that sometimes doesn't settle back even though the baby's no longer inside. So I think, you know, through Pilates or yoga, you can really help with people's postures and help shift some of the force that way. But I think sometimes with exercises and stretching isn't quite enough. Occasionally I'll come across somebody and they just need that hands-on manual approach to get rid of the tightness that is hard to shift through stretching alone. So I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, definitely with the abdominals, that it can feel really specific. There can be really sort of specific tight points, definitely around C-section scars. Usually there's one side or the other that's feels very tight around there, and so yeah, that manual stuff is just wonderful, because, you know, and it's the best feeling actually when you see your client and they sort of have a wow moment, really, with, oh my goodness, that feels so different now. You know, I thought this was how my tummy was, and you've just completely changed it. So it's really lovely to do that side of the work.
And I interrupted you because you said about the soft tissue, the breathing, and then there was a third thing. Yeah.
So we're all about getting us back to being strong and confident, and connecting the core, the diaphragm, and the pelvic floor together. And this is where things start to get I'm not going to say more difficult, but there's more time involved in rehabbing ourselves back to a good amount of strength. So there's been various studies done on fascia and healing, and the theory at the moment is that it takes around 500 days actually to fully heal with get all of the collagen properly healing in an injury, or any kind of change to fascia.
So that's nearly a year and a half. That's
so we shouldn't put pressure on ourselves in the slightest to be trying to bounce back in 3 months post baby. It's just not going to happen. We need to be really specific about what we're trying to achieve and be realistic about the time frames, but we can confidently say that we can get that strength back, and it doesn't actually take that much, but we do need to understand what exercises are going to be really beneficial, and 5 minutes a day of doing the right kind of exercises, just enough to create tension in the right way across your abdominal muscles, to encourage the body to lay down that collagen, start increasing the tension across the middle there, and getting yourself back to full strength. So
that's what I really like about the hypopressives, is that you can do it in the 5 minutes. Once you've learned the sequence, you can actually go through the whole sequence fairly quickly, and I find it's really doable for mums who have really quite young babies. It's not like giving
5-minute naps.
Instead of doing half an hour, you've got to do 40 minutes every day, that's just not going to happen. It's very doable, which is fantastic. Do you want to explain for people who've never heard of hypopressive exercises or seen, because sometimes people Google it or sort of YouTube it, and then you get these very, very dramatic pictures.
Yes, you do. So hypopressives are a type of breathing and postural exercise that we can learn, and it's hugely beneficial for loads of different reasons, but for the purpose of this talk, we're talking about diastasis recti, and it's really great for healing that separated abdominal muscles. When we do standard kind of abdominal crunches, lots of kind of more hardcore abdominal exercises, generally we'll be increasing the tension inside our abdominal cavity. Same as if you sneeze or cough or laugh, you're kind of increasing the pressure in this tummy area. So if you've got a weakness, and it might be in the front here down the abdominal midline, or it could be in the pelvic floor maybe, or anywhere, the weakness is going to show. It's gonna if you're increasing the pressure, it's going to go for the point of the weakness. So you're putting more pressure on that weakness, and you're kind of trying to separate the abdominals more.
The image I was going to say about the image of a whoopee cushion, and you're sort of putting pressure into the body, and then woof, that might be for some people through the tummy separation, that might be where the force goes and where the weakness is. For other people it might be through the pelvic floor, which leads to incontinence or prolapse issues. So they're different kind of pressure points, but I think that's a very strong image. That force has to go somewhere, and if we don't have everything, the integrity of the system, then we can start having issues.
So in everyday with somebody without any weaknesses, you would be able to maintain that withstand that increase in pressure easily, but there are many cases where that's not true, and when that happens, then hypopressives can be a really great tool for working and strengthening muscles without putting that outward pressure on them. And the way we do that is by breathing in such a way that you create a vacuum in the abdominal cavity, so that your pelvic floor, your diaphragm, and your core all kick in and contract, but in a position where there's less pressure, so everything's being sucked in. And that's where you see the classic kind of vacuum, kind of caved in tummy area of a hypopressives vacuum. And
I think it's important to say though that because if people do kind of do a YouTube search and see those big concave, not everybody gets such a big vacuum as that, and I find that they still have great success with the hypopressive exercises. So what you tend to see is people that get the bigger vacuum because it looks more dramatic, but don't feel like, you know, if you're intrigued that that's going to necessarily have to happen, you have to get to that point to see results, because I find some people have been put off by it actually.
Yeah, it's true actually. I mean, I think you're only going to get to that position of a huge really defined vacuum if you practice really regularly and you get really good at it. You're a teacher probably, and then you're putting yourself out there, but it's the internal changes in pressure that matter, and what's going on internally isn't necessarily what you're going to see from the outside. So absolutely, yes, it works, and it's really enjoyable to do actually. I find it quite mindful, and you know, you sort of just really thinking about your body and your positioning. There's quite a bit of detail in it, but it's because you're regulating your breathing. I think it works really well on a number of different levels for just taking 5 minutes out to look after yourself.
Yeah, I find it quite meditative, and I would say most people that I teach do it in the morning. They find that that's kind of when they can sneak it in before breakfast, and then it sets them up for the day, and then all through the day they're thinking about their posture. You do the breathing in different positions, so Gemma was sort of talking about that, but sort of standing, leaning forward, kneeling, on all fours, sitting, lying, so that the forces are working slightly different in different postures. And I think it just reminds you, if you work at a desk, then you think a bit more about your posture because you've done your little sequence in the morning. Because it's quite normal that people get into bad habits. A lot of us are very sedentary. On my admin days when I'm answering emails, and you know, I'm sitting a lot, I'm so conscious of that, and I make myself have little movement snacks, so I'll get up after a while, have a bit of a stretch and move around, or jump up and down on the spot, or I'm sure if somebody looked in through the window they'd think I was a little bit funny, but it feels so good just to move every so often, so you become aware of, oh yeah, there's a tightness coming in. And so I really encourage people also to, if they work at a desk, to see if they can stand and work some of the time, you know, because then you move around more than if you're sat on a comfortable chair and just there for the duration. So
yeah, saying to my clients all the time, movement is medicine, and you know, there's no such thing, and people worry about bad posture, and actually any posture is bad if that's the only posture you have. So you could be, you know, a soldier standing to attention outside Buckingham Palace and, you know, be in a lot of pain. So
as we saw at the Queen's, as we saw at the Queen's funeral, they were sort of standing to attention, and actually a couple fainted, didn't they? Because that restricted how various systems in their bodies were working. So that's a really good point. That's why I like to encourage people to sit on the floor. So if you've got a toddler or, you know, a little one at home, get down on the floor, because you'll keep changing positions. You won't get as comfy as if you're on a sofa and you just stay in one position. So
that's good.
I think this is the thing. It's I know what you're very good at is sort of giving lots of suggestions. It's kind of, you know, for how life is, how we need to function in life, what are the little bits that we can put in to make these things achievable and see a difference. Yeah, I don't know if you've got anybody that you can share a story about, or kind of I don't know, give people a sense of sort of how long it might take to see a change.
Sure. So I have a lady who I'm seeing at the moment, and she has a prolapse as well as separated abdominal muscles. She's had 2 children, the first of which was a C-section, and the second was a normal vaginal birth. And so quite a lot going on, you know, the more babies you have, the more you're changing your body, and so lots of things going on there. So if you look at how, if I just tell you about how the soft tissue work alone has not only helped her feel a little bit more reconnected with her core, but it's also made a difference to how her prolapse symptoms have been feeling. That's quite significant, and that's in probably sort of 3 or 4 sessions that we've had together. In terms of healing fully a diastasis, I can tell you now that, you know, I just did my check, you know, in front of you guys, and I've still got work to do. I feel really strong now, but I can tell that there is more tension that can come through, and I'm almost a year postnatal. So it's something that you do need to sort of keep working on, and every so often perhaps go and see somebody who can help you with, you know, keeping you on top of doing some exercises, keeping you on or following up with hypopressives, which is another great way of addressing diastasis. It's something which will naturally take its time, but you know, you can expect to see, if you're dedicated to it and give it 5 or 10 minutes 4 or 5 times a week, let's say, in reality, you know, you're never going to be able to do it every single day. Then you will see the difference, and you'll feel a difference much sooner than that. I'd say you'd start to feel stronger within a month or 2, and then it just gets better from there.
Because I think, you know, it's also something to help you as you get older. You know, as I said before, with the menopause and estrogen starting to decline, that affects how the muscle works, and so sometimes people start to find they get some issues. But if you're doing something already like hypopressives, I think that really helps you to age well. So it's a sort of long term. It's not something you just sort of learn and forget about it, but it's sort of a really wonderful skill to have, actually. And I did a course recently to become a This Mum Moves ambassador. So it was in collaboration between the Active Pregnancy Foundation and Get Fit Berkshire, and it was a really good course. But the only thing that niggled slightly was that there was a section about pelvic floor postnatally, and they're like, well, yes, you should, because this course was mainly attended by health visitors, midwives. They were the 2 main groups, so they were very much being told, get your clients doing their pelvic floor work, just like it was a super simple thing. Now, in my experience,
what does that even mean?
To do pelvic floor exercises is not simple. People don't always connect with what you're trying to explain. And the longer I've been teaching around that kind of area, the more I like exercises that actually work comprehensively around the region of the pelvis. So you're not targeting very specific muscles, but working holistically. So a few times during the course, I was like, so if you're getting people to do their pelvic floor exercises and you're a midwife, kind of how are you teaching them, or where are you sending them, where are you signposting them to? And then there is an NHS app called Squeezy that I need to have a look at to kind of see what's actually on it. But yeah, I find a lot of people are just told very sort of almost flippantly, yeah, well, you've got to do your pelvic floor exercises. But, you know, we know from what Gemma's been saying that actually the whole torso is connected, things are working together. And I don't know, what's your view, Gemma, about pelvic floor exercises and Kegels?
Well, very similar, actually. So I teach pelvic floor exercises, and I believe that they have their place. And part of the diastasis rehab exercise work that I might give to somebody would involve pelvic floor contraction, but I teach it in a very specific way. And it is so common that women come to me and they say, I try and do pelvic floor exercises, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I can't feel anything. I couldn't feel anything after I'd had Oscar. I couldn't feel a thing. And the women's health physio that I was seeing was like, well, you're doing them. I was like, okay, well, thanks for confirming that. So they can't feel anything. They don't know what they're doing, or they're like, well, I did them, but I don't know whether it's done any good. You know, I don't know if I'm doing them right. So there's a lot of confusion about it, and they are taught very differently. You know, I've even read things like people are told to practice them at traffic lights, and to hold, if you're told helpfully that it's the muscles that you use to stop having a wee, then that's great, but you should never really do that. You know, you're kind of encouraging urinary tract infections if you practice that regularly, and that detail is not enough. So I think they have their place, taught well, but personally, I think, like you, that our pelvic floor and our core needs to function whilst we're doing things. So teaching a functional exercise like a squat or a lunge that actually uses your pelvic floor naturally will strengthen it if we're doing it in the right way, if we're breathing in the right way, and if we understand how to use a pelvic floor contraction to increase the benefit of that exercise, then I think that's a much better way of doing it than just sort of sitting on a chair squeezing, or like trying to squeeze, or wondering what you're doing. That's my view. Sorry, did I get on my soapbox then? No,
I think it's the thing
about it.
Yeah, I think it's something we need to get on our soapbox about. I mean, I also do teach them sometimes, but I think we pick up all sorts of messages through life, and I think, you know, one of them as a woman is very often hold your tummy in. So I've had some women that I've taught hypopressives to that have really had to let go of that feeling, oh, you always need to be sucking your tummy in and making yourself look as slim as possible, and you can't breathe fully if the belly can't move. But I think another one is this idea that we're in grave danger of our pelvic floor being, I don't know, floppy and just completely weak and not functioning. But actually, a lot of people have too much tightness, you know, which is equally problematic as there being no toe, you know. So I think you're right. It's about the detail and, you know, having a bit of context so people understand what they're doing and why. And people will tell when they watch this how passionate we are.
Yes.
So what kind of message would you like to leave people with if they discover they have a diastasis recti?
Yeah, the key messages that I think for people are that it's very common and very normal to have a gap, and to not worry about the width of it, just the function and the tension that we can create, and that is very achievable. So even if you've kind of checked yourself and you think, oh my goodness, there's like, I can get my whole fist in there, that is really common, you know, is nothing that is not dealable with. So, you know, it's not the end of the world, but you know, if you are struggling with a bit of back pain, or you know, breathing difficulties, or you know, just trying to connect yourself back up so that maybe you can get back to running or another form of exercise, see somebody and talk about it, because it is very fixable, and it won't, you know, it doesn't take a lot of effort. We're talking about a few minutes a day just to start working on tensioning it back up.
And I think it's super important, because I think when you feel physically stronger, you feel psychologically stronger as well. So
definitely.
If there's a sense of, you know, I was talking about at the beginning of that disconnection, and, you know, spending that little bit of time and having that TLC for your body will have a ripple out effect.
Yeah, definitely.
So I will put your links in the description, but can you tell people now where they can find you?
Oh yes, you can find me on the internet at GemmaMilesSoftTissueTherapy.com, and I'm also on Facebook, Gemma Miles Soft Tissue Therapy, and Instagram, I think that's GM Soft Tissue Therapy.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear from anyone. If you've got any questions or anything, then I'd love to hear. If you want to ask me something, I can help if I can.
Right, it's been fabulous talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It's been really interesting. I love chatting about this stuff.
Thank you.